So here's a story that should absolutely break your heart. This mom is facing 27 years in prison after officials say she lied about her residence to get her 3 kids TennCare that resulted in the state paying $24,000 in fees and claims. So let me explain what that means. TennCare is Medicaid. It's Tennessee's Medicaid. This mom made a little too much money to qualify for Medicaid, but she falls exactly in the gap that we've talked about before on this show. If you're really poor, you can get health care through Medicaid. If you're old, you get it through Medicare. If you're a veteran, you get it through the VA. But if you're a working person, many working people get it through their jobs, but some don't. And some are in this weird position where they're not poor enough to get Medicaid, but they're still poor, and they can't really afford to pay for their health care, and they don't get it through their job. So what do those people do? A lot of them are screwed, and a lot of these people are the ones who go bankrupt from medical bills. So what did this woman do? She was like, okay, she lived in Mississippi, but she's like, I guess she's close to Tennessee, and she's like, I'm going to just try to get Medicaid through Tennessee. And I guess it required a little bit of lying about where she lived or the numbers of what she made or whatever. But she was caught, and because effectively they got, the kids got $24,000 worth of health care, they're now trying to throw the book at her. They say TennCare fraud is a Class D felony and theft of property of over $10,000, but under $60,000 is a Class C felony. So yeah, she faces up to 27 years in prison. A lot of people are saying, well, she won't actually get all of that. The thing that is illegal here is trying to get health care. That's what's considered illegal. That's what's considered theft of property, is trying to get health care for her kids. Do you realize how insane this is? Do you realize how this looks to the rest of the developed world? You go show this story to somebody in Canada or Australia or the UK. They'll be like, huh? You're going to lock up a woman who has 3 kids because she committed the crime of trying to get her kids health care. By the way, why would she do this? Why would she do this? Because she can't afford it. If she could pay for it and afford it, she would have done it. But she can't pay for it and afford it, so she had to try to do something, and this is what she came up with. Is there anything you wouldn't do to get your kids health care? That's my question for you. If you're a good person, if you're a moral person, if you're an ethical person, presumably you'd be like, I'll do anything to get my kids health care. This is like the classic thing that's brought up in philosophy class. Is it ever moral to steal? And then the example people give is, you got a sick kid, and they need medicine, and you don't have the money, but you can get it from the pharmacy. Do you get it? You take it. Can you do it? Would you do it? Is that the right thing to do? Everybody says yes. So it's like, well, obviously, we value human life a lot more than we value property rights for something where perhaps it shouldn't even be considered property. It should be totally socialized. There's certain things that should be off the table. Military, cops, fire department, infrastructure, healthcare. Faces up to 27 years in prison because she wanted to get her kids health care because she couldn't afford it. This country is cruel, man. I'm sorry. This is as cruel as it gets. What do you do in a situation where the real criminals is the system? The real criminals are the status quo. Like, the system should be indicted here. The system is criminal. She didn't do anything wrong. She didn't do anything wrong at all. If, honestly, the left should hold this woman up and make this a huge story. Because this is just so... This proves everything we've ever said about our system when it comes to healthcare. This is such a no-brainer, and the American people agree. Now the polls are like 69% or something like that, favor Medicare for all. That's a lot. It's gone up, 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 and up. Why? Because there's a pandemic and tens of millions of people don't have health care or lost their health care. People are terrified of going bankrupt because they got sick. This is the system we live in. People get it, man. The only people who don't get it, the politicians. And why don't the politicians get it? Because they're taking money from the for-profit health insurance companies. That's why. Because they're corrupt. They're corrupt. They're representing the interests of big pharma and the for-profit health insurance companies. Free this woman. I'd argue, if anything, she's a hero. We need Medicare for all. This system is as cruel as it gets. Honestly, when I read this story, it feels the same as like reading about apartheid or something. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not trying to make the connection because of race. What I'm saying is apartheid was obviously egregiously evil. Segregation was obviously egregiously evil. This is on the same moral plane as that. Potentially 27 years in prison because you wanted to get your kids health care because you couldn't afford it. Just get the hell out of here. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It's the most immoral and unethical thing I've ever heard. The year is 2020, and it's like we're reading something from, feudal lords or back in the day. Or some crazy dictator who's chopping people's heads off or whatever. That's how egregious this sounds. And this should be the biggest story in the country. The media should be talking about this nonstop. But you're not going to hear about it in many places except left-wing outlets. And that's a goddamn shame. We need to adjust our priorities, guys. This is unacceptable.